Excellent.
Great. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Shiatsu therapists all over the world, Shiatsu sisters and brothers. I'm excited to have another week with you and share what we love, which is Shiatsu. Shiatsu is my life. Giuseppe here in the group said, I think it's true for many of us. Yeah, I'm excited to do this again. And we have a mystery guest this week, and it turns out the surprise is me, as Chris McAlister and Ivan Belt, previous guests on the podcast, double team and turned the hot chair on me. So I'm in the hot chair today, and Chris will be the talk show host.
Yep.
So that's the mystery, and we're going to talk about, in a way, what we all are experiencing is this, in a way, a collective trauma, and how trauma, in a way, is necessary and part of our life experiences. So that will be the topic. So I'm going to hand over the mic and turn the sides around. I feel a little nervous. The sides around.
Yeah.
As I'm going to be the one that is being interviewed. So thank you, Chris, for doing this and coming up with this idea.
Very cool. Mihael, nice to be able to pay back. And it's an honor to take this position for once and let you tell your story, because I'm sure a lot of people out there are interested to hear it. Now, my first question to you is, how come you started this group called Everything Shiatsu? How did that come about?
Well, Everything Shiatsu, just like Giuseppe has mentioned, Shiatsu is my love and my love also, and has been an ongoing love affair for the last 20 years almost. And Everything Shiatsu group was started with the intention of, well, actually for selfish reasons initially, is because I wanted to connect myself to the rest of the world and see what's going on all over the world when it comes to Shiatsu therapy. So, of course, life makes you busy, and this group organically grew. But during the pandemic, a desire that I always had, which was to create a podcast, out of a need that I saw. So I said, why won't I do it now? The pandemic was a great opportunity to create this group and bring the community closer together and bring fantastic guests and speakers. And here we are.
Very cool. So it sounds a little bit like the way most of us come in contact with Shiatsu. We do it for ourselves first, and then we realize that we're giving everybody else a gift as well. Is that more or less how you'd see it?
Always. It has to be a win-win situation, and that's why I chose Shiatsu therapy. Just the philosophy and the way of learning it, the emphasis on developing self is part of my own personal and spiritual journey. So Shiatsu was a fit. Yeah.
We had a little talk, obviously, before this interview, and so I asked Mihael a few questions about his experience leading up to discovery of Shiatsu. It's always interesting to hear how people came into Shiatsu. Now, you told me something pretty exciting about something that happened in Dharamsala in India in your very first encounter with Shiatsu. You want to tell us something about that?
Yeah, it's a long story, but I'll try and make it very short.
No worries.
At 25, I decided to give myself a trip to the Far East. I always say sometimes we need to go far away to find ourselves or find parts of ourselves. And India was always, since I was a little boy, a land of mystique, a land of spirituality, of adventure. So I was really excited to embark on this trip. And traveling throughout India, it was quite a shock. I don't know how many people have been to India. but it's definitely a land of contradiction and a land of extremes. And it's definitely the spiritual element there, and there's just the opposite. And you see that every day, sometimes hour to hour. It's full of extremes. And after traveling through Bombay and Delhi and seeing some really crazy things, I was seeking a peaceful place, and I heard about Dharamsala, which is where the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans reside. And I took a long journey and got there at 4 o'clock in the morning on a bus with very few foreigners. And there was a British fella and a Japanese fella. And the three of us huddled together by a tea stand until the sun came up. And when the sun came up, we hung out together, got the same hotel. The British fellow was a mountaineer. So on one of the days, he encouraged us to climb on a local mountain. And he made it seem quite easy. And he really lied to us. And this local mountain was really one of the Himalaya mountains. So we ended up on a 3-day climb with acclimatation at the top, endangering our lives. I had to crawl on my hands and knees at times because the paths were so narrow. And we reached the top of one of the Himalayan mountains. It was quite a spectacular view and an experience I will never forget. But as I was coming down from the mountain, from that expedition, I was in a lot of pain, a lot of back pain. And I thought, wow, what a great place to have a pain, because there's all these Tibetan monks, and I'm sure I will find someone to fix my pain. And I went to the city square, and there was a bulletin board, quite a big wall with all kinds of posters of classes and treatments. It was quite overwhelming when you're in a lot of pain to choose one. But one stood out with a body with a strange map of lines on it, which I've never seen before. And I got close to it, and there was a scroll attached on the poster. And when I opened the scroll, it was a treasure map to find this person. And I thought, Himalaya's treasure map, it somehow fit. And I started to follow the instructions. In those little towns, there's no street names. So you follow the paces that the man writes. I assumed it was a man. And you follow the directions, and all of a sudden you reach a little house. I knocked on the door, and there was a little fella about 5'4", about the height of Ohashi, if you see an Ohashi person. And he looked at me up and down, and he just started to laugh at me without saying a word. And I assumed I looked really funny, and I was laughing with him. And then he went completely serious, and he said, I know exactly where you're from. And I said, nobody knows exactly where I'm from. He knew where I was born, where I grew up, and where I come from. And my jaw just dropped. And I said, how did you know? And he said, a Shiatsu master knows everything about you in 5 minutes. And
That's quite a claim, isn't it, Mihael?
I was shocked. I just thought this guy was, a Jedi of some sort. And, I said, can I get a session from you? And he said, not today, come tomorrow morning. And tomorrow morning came, and I hesitated, and I didn't go. And the next day I had to leave the town. 6 months later, I was back from that trip. I was thinking of going into therapy because I realized when I came back, I really wanted to help people. And I looked at all the therapy schools, and I gave up on all of them. I was like, this is not me, this is not me. And one day I saw a program that the Langara College, a local college, was launching, and it was called the Shiatsu therapy program. And I'm like, Shiatsu, where did I see this before? Oh, in Dharamsala, and the man knew everything about me in 5 minutes. So I started to read the theory behind it, and I had goosebumps. I just had goosebumps, and I picked up the phone and I signed up over the phone without even going for an interview, and that was it. That's how I found Shiatsu.
And you met Yolanda at the school.
Orlando was one of my classmates, yes.
Fantastic.
It was an amazing experience, something that I still remember quite vividly.
And this was in Vancouver, is that correct?
Yeah, Vancouver, Canada.
All right.
Yeah.
So tell us about your teachers. Who are your main teachers?
Well, the creator of the program was a man called Ted Thomas. And Ted Thomas discovered Shiatsu actually in Australia and in his travels, and decided to create a program in Western British Columbia, Western Canada, and he was instrumental in promoting Shiatsu in Canada. And still is still working, and we had other teachers there, but he was the main teacher.
So he was one of the Shiatsu pioneers in Canada.
That's right. Yeah, Ted Saito brought Shiatsu to Canada, and Ted Thomas was one of his students, but also a pioneer in bringing Shiatsu to Canada. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, almost 35 years ago, 30 years ago, 35 years ago. Yeah.
There you go. But when we spoke, Mihael, it sounded to me like you've been using your Shiatsu in quite an interesting and quite a different format than most of us are used to. And you formed a partnership with a guy who did hypnotherapy. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, about 10 years ago, I decided to open an integrative center, as I was working a lot with patients that experience all kinds of traumas. And that has been my calling since the beginning for my own journey with resolving my own traumas. Since the beginning, I just attracted a lot of trauma patients. And as I gained the experience, I saw a huge need. When I started actually looking at statistics, because I always assumed, and many people assume, that we live in safe environments in safe countries. You know, I grew up, I come from the Soviet Union, a lineage of a lot of hardships. I grew up also in Israel, where there's a lot of trauma. And my family came to Canada because it's a safe place. But what I was seeing clinically was telling me a different story. So at first I thought it was just me. Maybe it's me, I'm attracting these patients. But as I was researching to help myself work with these patients and started to come across statistics, I was actually quite shocked at the epidemic levels of trauma in Canada. And Canada leads the world in post-traumatic stress disorder, which is PTSD. And
Do you have an idea why that is?
That when I discovered why, I was shocked that we led the world in PTSD.
Yeah.
Second, then I tried to understand why, and what I understand and research is that in countries like Canada, where when a traumatic event does happen, Canada, countries like Holland, UK, some of the European countries where we are insular societies, there's not a lot of support, social support around trauma. So when something traumatic happens to me in Vancouver, Canada, there's not right away support. We live in our own insular pockets. The front liners are overwhelmed with the numbers that they're dealing with. The doctors are not educated or informed about diagnosing trauma. So a lot of people are walking around with post-traumatic stress disorder, not knowing that they're suffering from the effects of trauma. And again, we don't expect traumatic events to happen to us, because the message that we always get is it's safe here, this is a safe country, this is a safe city. And a lot of people are left dealing with the effects of trauma. So when I started to see the stats, for example, women in Canada and in a lot of Western countries, 50% of women have either been physically, sexually, or mentally, emotionally abused. That's 1 out of 2. And those women that raise their hands as part of the statistics, And in Canada, we have a native population. That's excluding the native population. So that's not including the native population. So I was shocked because I started to think of all the women in my life, from family to friends, and I was shocked at the numbers. And men are not that far behind. So when you look at those numbers, you're seeing epidemic levels of trauma. And as I started to research more and more, I understood the trauma. Not just understood, it's actually there. The data is there to show the trauma is at the root of many chronic diseases. So a lot of the chronic pain patients that you see, chronic heart disease, cancers, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, chronic digestion problems, trauma is underneath there.
Mihael, how about this very, very common complaint now of burnout? Would you say that there's a direct relationship with trauma?
Yeah, well, it's a depleted state. So oftentimes when patients have come to me and they want help, the focus is always on nourishing their systems because they're so depleted. And if one of their symptoms is depression, most likely 80% of the time, it's a burnout state. So when you're burning out, you depress. And then negative intrusive thoughts come in and mental illness starts. But oftentimes, 8 out of 10 patients that are depressed are actually burnt out.
Yeah. But how does that relate to trauma then? Is there trauma in the bottom of that often?
That's right. Well, when trauma happens to us, I always say it's what it does to us and the volume that it creates in the mind and the body, and the lack of tools that we have. We don't have the tools to deal with it. So the volume is overwhelming, and the mind and the body then manage that volume. Now you can manage it for a month and you can come out of it. But if you start to manage it for a year, 5 years, 10 years, and it's not diagnosed, I mean, you're chasing your tail with the symptoms, you go from one specialist to another specialist to another specialist. By the time they come to me or to our Shiatsu therapists, they have a list of things that they've tried. How exhausting that is. Sometimes just hearing their journey of trying to resolve their trauma is exhausting. So I can't imagine how exhausted they are, right?
So tell us something about the team that you assembled there, because there was the guy doing hypnotherapy, but you had a whole bunch of other people there, right?
That's right. So once I saw the epidemic levels of trauma in my city and in my country, I decided to open a center that works specifically with it. And I wanted to integrate the different modalities because each system is affected when you're managing trauma for so long. Your mental health is affected, your biochemistry is affected, your alignment is affected, the stress in the muscles are affected, the energy is affected, everything is affected. So you really need to work in an integrated way to help a person move back to healing, and that's why I created the center. So I brought psychotherapists, counselors, hypnotherapists, naturopathic doctors, chiropractors, traditional Chinese medicine practitioners, massage therapists, osteopaths, occupational therapists, and all kinds of teachers, because we did a lot of education with it. And we had to come up with a way, a system, a model, a philosophy to work with that kind of complexity. And that's where we came up with part of the things that we created is a panel to assess a patient that comes to us. And that will be comprised of a psychotherapist, a naturopathic doctor, and myself. And we created an integrative form, an intake form. It's a 2-hour process of interviewing the patient, taking all the details down, and then sitting together as a team and trying to come up with a treatment plan that is specifically for the needs of that patient specifically at that time in their life, and create a treatment plan for them, man. And
So let me ask you this, Michael. Would it be common that 2 or 3 different people would come in and have quite radically different treatment programs, or would it look quite similar for everybody?
yes, it'll be very different from
Very different.
patient to patient. Yeah. And again, depends their belief system, depends on their comfort level. You cannot force a trauma patient to undertake treatments they're not comfortable with, or they might interpret as invasive. So a patient might be, for example, very ready and very interested in taking something like hypnotherapy, and others will be completely scared. Or a patient might be open to receiving acupuncture, but others will be terrified because, you know, some of the traumas that we experience are also in medical treatments, procedures, surgeries, invasive procedures, or even history with addiction. Heroin addicts will come to us. So there's a lot of trauma that can happen with needles also.
Yeah.
Procedures. So we always gauge where that patient is and customize a treatment plan for them.
In English, we have a phrase which you're no doubt familiar with: horses for courses.
Horses for courses, yeah.
Sounds like what you were doing there is finding which course those horses would best be able to adapt to.
The team will also create a dialogue through the sessions, and we will make adjustments if the adjustments were necessary throughout the treatment protocol. So sometimes patients can change very fast, and sometimes they have adverse reactions to certain treatments, and even certain practitioners can trigger.
So tell me about your views on the chemistry between therapists and, let's say, receivers in this kind of situation then.
Well, when a trauma patient comes to you, it's needless to say, trust is everything. But to gain that trust is the battle. And you also have to assume that whatever they're telling you is not always correct or true. Because when somebody lives in a traumatic state, in a complex state, their perception of self and reality can be distorted. So what they perceive and what they see and what they feel is not always necessarily true. And especially in the beginning, when they tell you what they're going through, their story, the relationship dynamics, is not always necessarily true. So at some point, you have to find those pieces, and you got to create that clarity also for the patient with time. And I'm always invested in teaching the patient how to embody trust. And one of the things I always tell every patient that comes to me, I don't need you to trust me. What I'm invested in is how to teach you to embody trust inside of you. And then it's a matter of showing them how, and the body is such a great resource for truth. And our job is really to connect them to their truth, and through the body is in a way, a very tangible way. And that's one of my passions, is I love doing that.
Now, you told me about this method which you have, resetting the nerve system, I think that's what you called it, and through that, using a testing method to do that. You want to talk us through that very quickly?
Yes. I mean, why Shiatsu is so effective is because what it does to the autonomic nervous system. And oftentimes I find, again, because of the complexity of patients when they come in, it's easy for us as therapists to want our patients to close their eyes and relax and just get into the chi and the session. But when patients that are hypervigilant, and they have a strategy for any possibility that might happen, when you deal with such hypervigilance, it's very hard for a patient like that to fully relax and close their eyes. And oftentimes some of these patients have been abused and tortured, and you don't even know it. So again, based on the stats, you have to assume that. I had to come up with a way where initially I engage them in the treatment, and the way that I came up with is engaging them through their own nervous system. So I created, part of it is, again, my learning of Sotai, and how effective that can be in doing it to the patient. But I made some adjustments to that technique, and it's a way, again, of enabling the patient to be engaged directly with the nervous system, to measure what's weak, what's not weak. When you create this movement, by the time the mind sends that message to that leg, for some reason it doesn't connect. So that creates a lot of awareness. And when you start to reset the nervous system through those movements, the patients are amazed, because right away they gain range, they gain not only range, but they gain all of a sudden a sense of space, where initially the movement was quite dull or heavy, and all of a sudden there's a lightness that comes. They start to relax as you go body part to body part, and by the time you do a reset through the whole nervous system, they are either completely drained because the adrenaline just started to come off, or fully relaxed for the first time in a very long time. And then I can go into stimulating the meridians, do some hard work, and things like that. But I give them also tools of measuring how their mind affects their body, and using the body, you can give them very tangible ways of measuring, and also recognizing what stressors affect their nervous system and those habitual patterns.
Stressors could be, for example, what?
The stressors, we always divide it to external or internal. So is it something that you're eating, something that you're feeling inside, thinking about? And again, I've given them a measuring tool every day to measure that, and then recognize what are the triggers. Or is it your work? Is it your lifestyle? Is it the environment that you're in, the relationship that you're in? So through the body, it helps them to gauge very clearly what could be a trigger if they're not aware of it.
Now, just backtracking very slightly, during our conversation, I was pretty staggered to hear you mention something that I really hadn't thought was that important. You said that people were getting involved in a lot of fairly dark activities, and that was causing a lot of trauma.
Yeah,
tell us more about that, because that could be surprising for a lot of people, I imagine.
It's something that I only came across at the volume of it when we had the integrative center, and now with a lot of mental illness and a lot of traumas are caused by playing around with dark magic, playing around with Ouija boards, playing around with spirit realms, playing around even with cults. I've worked with people that, and still work with people that are in a cult or been exposed to a cult. It's something, again, that we don't hear enough about, but it's something that does exist. And again, the number of people that have mentioned that, because our initial assessment and the programs that are created, they're so thorough, that information ends up coming out one way or another. And we've seen, a lot of darkness over the years. And people playing around with, again, with things that you don't need to play around with. and being damaged by it.
Yeah, this discussion that we had and what you're telling me now, it sounds like it merges into that whole field of what some people call possession and what other people call schizophrenia or double split personalities. And you actually told me that people could register different voices, could express themselves in different voices. Tell us a little bit about that quickly.
Well, one of the treatments that we've created was a tandem treatment where myself and one of my clinical hypnotherapists work together. So where clinical hypnotherapy is really effective is tapping into the subconscious and bypassing in a way those protective mechanisms that the mind developed. And a lot of time, and as you would go and help them access the subconscious, a lot of the trauma will come up and the causes of trauma, the memories of trauma. And I would find where they are in the body and help that person release them from the body. So it was a very complete treatment because you access the subconscious and the body at the same time. And during those sessions, the person sometimes would speak in voices that are not theirs. Sometimes with an accent. And sometimes it did feel like an exorcism at times. So we've done hundreds of treatments like that over the years, and it's a phenomenon that I saw over the years happen quite a bit.
Getting back to the physicality, you just told us really in a sense that certain of these traumas can even be stored in specific parts of the body. Were there any parts that were more common than others?
Yes. And again, after working, God, with so many patients over the years with trauma, that you definitely see patterns, very clear patterns. And of course, the heart is such a great storage facility for trauma. I always educate the patients how, we manage and we store in the heart. But to access the heart is, when somebody is hypervigilant, is hard. To release, years of trauma is very difficult, even when they want to. So there are certain protective mechanisms that the body definitely creates and the mind creates. So that's why I always do the work with the nervous system first. But definitely the intestines hold a lot of trauma, events that have been undigested or unassimilated, gut-wrenching experiences, experiences where your boundaries have been crossed. So gut permeability is a big problem today. And then of course you have the shocks of trauma around the heart, the groin and the sexual organs is a very volatile area, both for men and women. But it's an area that can also, if used correctly, can also release a lot of repressed anger and rage, which is so detrimental on your health. But when it's released, you could see the chemistry change right away, because we would do a lot of blood work before and after, and you could see the chemistry of the body change very quickly when anger and rage is released.
Now, Mihael, what you're talking about there is coming very close to the kind of things that researchers use when they try to measure the effects of certain treatments. Did you ever think about moving into that?
I always think about doing that, but it's just, first of all, I'm not an expert in doing it, but I know we have a community, a Shiatsu community, that is dedicated in doing it and offering support around that. And just creating the time. I finally have time now.
Mm-hmm.
that I really didn't have over the last 10 years. And this is why we created Everything Shiatsu podcast. But one of the things I do want to create is some research, again, about how Shiatsu can be really effective around post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma. And in particular, the method that I've created and I've worked with. One of the things that we saw during the programs, it's one thing to help patients heal and resolve their traumas, but what was more important is to teach them the skills and give them the tools to build that resilience that they lack. And this is where I created Neuropath Reset. Is again, I would work with patients, and I still do one-on-one, but I also teach them the tools in a group setting. And group work is also very important for patients with trauma or any kind of chronic condition, because chronic pain or trauma is a very isolating phenomenon. And a lot of people feel like they live life sitting in a prison being tortured every day. That's how people live life today. They could be surrounded by a lot of people, but feel completely alone.
Yeah, they can be living lives of luxury, right? But still,
that's right.
Like
working with CEOs or successful people, they are some of the most hyper-vigilant people you'll ever meet. And on the surface, they look perfect. They look the part. And they work daily, hourly, so hard to sustain that adaptation. And everybody's patting them on the back saying how great they're doing. But inside, they're tortured, with things that have happened to them in the past.
So a possible research pattern might revolve around actually these groups and the work that the patients do for themselves to sustain their levels of well-being, right?
That's right. That's right. And this is the exciting part for me is when I developed those classes and took groups to see, first of all, if it works. I thought conceptually it will work. I didn't know how well and if it will work consistently. And taking different groups over the last few years and developing this class format was really satisfying, because you see certain phenomena that happens in a group setting. One is, first of all, you're not alone with your pain. You recognize your pain in somebody else. Their story is very much like you, or sometimes it was like you 1 year ago, and now you see yourself 1 year ahead in the other person, and all of a sudden you develop hope. Hey, she was me, and I was there, and I can be there. So there's that reference point that you can see in a group setting, and also to see for the patients to experience that those methods work. And as long as they cling on to one method, I teach 3 methods in those 6 classes. And even if they use just method and it works for them for that time in their life, that's amazing, because now they have a tool that they didn't have before for their anxiety, for their pain, for their distress.
So tell us about the 3 methods, Mihael.
Well, the 3 methods, and the first method is a self-regulation, which comes with those Neuropath Reset movements that I've created. Some of them are similar to Sotai, and are Sotai-like, and some of them adjustments to those movements. Then self-ampuko, and 2 types of breath works. 2 types. Why 2 types of breath work? Because depends on their anxiety level. One breath work can really help people with those high anxiety levels, and the other one really helps with resilience, developing resilience in the vascular and nervous system. So I teach them separately. but I also create a routine where they sequence all of them together.
Right. Yeah. So they could pursue one of those channels more exclusively if they felt really aligned with it, but they can also combine all three together.
That's right. So, I've been kind of in my lab and seeing the work that I've done with those patients, and those were really a foundational class. But now I'm expanding into developing those classes and going deeper into them. And I wanted to see that it works and it's worthwhile, and also see where I can adjust it, what can I add, what can I take away, and unfortunately the pandemic is here now, so I can't do group classes anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, but I'm thinking of taking it online and trying that form, and seeing how that works.
You know, some people work better online even because they don't have to have that face-to-face thing. They can actually just relax in their own environment. For some people, it can even be an advantage.
Yeah, but the thing with releasing trauma, you definitely feel like you need to be in the room with them in case something does come up.
Yeah.
Because when I work with them, I always say it doesn't matter what comes up in the room, it will be handled. And you'll be safe here. It doesn't matter how intense it is, or you think it will be intense, it will be handled. And when you own that space, people can really let go. Yeah.
That seems to be one of the central parts of Shiatsu, the way that we hold the space. You have more to say about that?
Yes. A lot of it comes with experience and confidence that no matter what walks through that door, they'll get the best of me and it will be handled, and creating that connection again with the patient is so important, but also disarming the protective mechanisms. A lot of it is that. I mean, and actually the patients that worry me the most, and what I've learned from experience, are the patients that say, I'm so ready to create this change, whatever it takes, where do I sign up? Those are the patients that actually worry me the most, because I know they're going to give me the most resistance. And it's the other way around. When the patient come and they say, I've given up, I've tried everything, I've given up, just take me outside and shoot me. Those are the patients that I'm really excited inside when I hear that, because usually with those patients, massive change can happen very quickly. So beware of those patients that are very excited.
They'll never come back. So listen, each of us has our own path to get to the kind of confidence and the kind of composure that you're talking about, because things can really explode. It can go down really fast in a treatment, right? When you least expect it, something can just leap out at you. Now,
yes.
Tell us about some of the important things that you've been through personally that have helped you to get that kind of strength and composure.
Well, one thing is don't take things personally. That's such a great lesson. I mean, it's easier said than done, because Shiatsu therapists are very empathetic, sensitive creatures, and we feel to such depth, and that is our strength. But at the same time, empathy can be also dangerous, because empathy to me means I can feel what you're feeling, but I feel it inside of me. So it can be mine, and I'll be affected and even manipulated by it. I'd rather be sensitive than empathetic. So I can be sensitive to what you're going through, but I don't need to feel it inside of me. So this creates a clear boundary. And so not taking things personally is really important, because trauma can release all kinds of things. And I tell the patients, there are days you're going to tell me that you love me, I'm the best thing since, and then the next week you're going to tell me that you hate me and this is not working. I mean, it's a process and it's a journey, and your job is to be there present with them no matter what comes up, and to make the necessary adjustments in a way to be like a samurai and a geisha at the same time.
Interesting combination.
Yeah, and I heard that a long time ago from Ohashi, and I actually purchased a metal samurai, and I have it in my room to always remind me you have to have the strength of a samurai and the courage, but also to be very sensitive like a geisha. So you have to bring that duality into the session and bring that quality in the moment sometimes too. When to be strong, when to help them cross that barrier of resistance, and when to be sensitive and allow that breakdown, you know, and every shade in between.
Sounds like you're describing a full range from deep yin to extreme yang there.
That's right. That's right. And everything in between, because everything in between can come up.
Now, what about things like transference, which gets called in psychotherapy, when things get thrown onto you or projected onto you and suddenly you're a bad guy, or things get mixed up? Do you want to tell us anything about that?
That's right. That's why you cannot take things personally, you know, because at times there's certain qualities of you that will trigger the patient. You know, I remember recently working with a patient, and I reminded her of her ex-husband.
Oh boy.
And that was such a traumatic relationship. And she, the funny thing, she's a psychologist. And she admitted to me, as she was projecting things onto me, she admitted to me that she was doing that. And she recognized that she was doing that. And it's just my presence. It's about presence and those boundaries again of not taking things personally and being present but detached. And I think this is the gift of Shiatsu too, because you are embodying those qualities when you are treating. So we can be great at that, and it's just a matter of practice and owning your energy and feeling grounded in the session, feeling grounded in your space is vital, because transference can happen very, very easily, especially with traumatic patients. And codependency too is a big problem. You know, you're the therapist, I am the patient. You're going to fix me. Can you fix this for me, Mihael? Can you fix this for me? No. Oh, can you heal? I heard you're such a great healer. You know, I heard you do great healings. And I always shake my head, no. If you expect me to fix you, or if you expect me to be this great healer, we are not for each other. This is the door. You can walk right back out. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know,
for sure, we have to be very careful with those kind of words, don't we?
Yeah. And that's what I absorb again and learn in having an integrative clinic, because you're dealing not only with the patients, you're dealing with an array of therapists, and you could see the struggles also as a clinic director and a lead therapist. I was also dealing with the struggles of each therapist as they were working with the patients. We all have our developmental process as a therapist. So when you work in a team and you work with such complexity, you're going to be triggered. You're going to struggle with certain things too.
Yeah.
And my job was also to help the therapists and the practitioners through their own struggles. And oftentimes it's egocentric.
What do you mean by that, Mihael?
Well, the ego can come into play, right? Because they come from different school systems, they come in from different dogmas, and they bring their own personal baggage. We all bring our own personal baggage.
Amen.
into it. So checking your ego at the door when you come in, it's really a practice, you know, and it's something that you must practice every day. And not everybody consciously practices that. So when they come through the door to the clinic, they also bring their ego into it, and that could be problematic.
I'm imagining that the people who stayed the distance with you for a few years were team players by nature.
Yes, yes, and you know, the mature, they grew a lot in the process. Like I have, I wasn't perfect, and I had a lot of growing to do in the process myself. And having that responsibility of you know, results for the patients or outcomes, and running teams really made me help grow and evolve. So, you know, if you're open to learning and growing and evolving, you're in it for the long term.
Now I want to come back all the way to the beginning, Mihael. I want to dovetail back because we gave a title to this little interview today, The Importance of Trauma. Now, why on earth would trauma be important?
That's a very good question. You know, when I dealt with my own traumas as a young man, and I was lucky, I say I was lucky because I had the right help at the right time, and I felt like I was guided to heal fairly quickly. But when my subconscious revealed memories of things, years that I'd forgotten, and I had to deal with my traumas, you know, when you remember your traumatic event or you re-experience it, it's like the fabric of reality can feel like it tears apart, and the ground you feel your feet on is void. So it's a very scary place.
Sounds like the classic having the carpet drawn from underneath you.
That's right. It can feel very much like that, and that's why it's so terrifying to deal with trauma. And oftentimes you think, why me? Why it happened to me? Why, you know, I didn't deserve that. I didn't deserve that, you know, abuse. I didn't deserve that heartache. I didn't deserve that experience. I didn't deserve that accident. I didn't deserve this pain. You know, it's not my fault. You know, so you go through that process. We all go through that process at some point. But as you walk through your pain, and what you discover when you go through your, what I call the valley of darkness, you really discover, you know, the journey and that collective pain that we all really going through. One of the experiences that I had as a young man was realizing that we all are traumatized. And it was in an experience that I had with a group of people. And the byproduct of that was just tremendous amount of love that I felt. You can even say it's almost a feeling of the divine, of God, of this collective love. And then I realized that, wow, I'm not alone. We are all traumatized, just in different ways. We come into this world in a trauma, the birth, and we leave with a trauma, which is death. And we experience so many traumas in between. Even if we try to avoid it, even if we build a bunker and go underneath it, we'll experience some trauma. So it's unavoidable. It's just a fact of this experience. There's no reason to it. There's no reasoning with it. And when you go through your pain or your suffering, and you realize that in a way we are all, the micro is a reflection of the macro, and we are all experiencing a similar experience, just in different ways. Wow, you feel this tremendous empathy and tremendous love, and then you can also, in a way, springboard on your trauma, and use the pain as a transformation tool to evolve, to evolve and to find a higher purpose.
How do you do that, Mihael?
Well, you really have to dive into your pain,
Mm.
and that's not easy. And when I say I was lucky in my early 20s, it's because I discovered meditation, and I sat, many months in silence and learning a lot about the mind, body, on an experiential level. And when you dive into your pain, you also discover healing is right there, in the same line of pain. And in a way, it's right there. It's not something that is so far-fetched, and you have to spend so much time and so much of your life energy to discover it. It can be right there for you, and it's always present.
What's interesting here is that you're pointing us towards a spiritual tool, in a sense. Meditation is a spiritual tool.
Yeah, it's
the actual key to unlocking this trauma.
Yeah, you have to go in. When they say you have to go in, you have to be with yourself, with your pain, at some point in your life, and in a way, that's what dissolves a lot of your pain.
So just one final question. It sounds from what you're saying that you had some very high quality support in that endeavor.
Yes, I had great therapists. When I worked with my own trauma, and they said the right things at the right time, that always stuck with me, and again helped me position myself in here into a way of using my pain as an opportunity. What's the opportunity in my suffering? Why am I meant to suffer so much? And when you ask those deep questions, what is the purpose in this? And you allow yourself to go deeper and deeper into it, you come on the other side. It's like climbing on that Himalayan mountain. You can only see the way from that viewpoint. And in a way, it was symbolic for me to climb on that Himalayan mountain, because then I understood the why. Why my trauma was so necessary. And it was necessary because, the purpose was to help others in that journey. It's a journey. And a lot of what we do as therapists is just be part of a very intimate journey that, we all are going through. It's such a privilege. It's such an honor to be part of the journey, that journey of transformation from pain to joy.
That's a beautiful moment to end, Mihael. We're right at the top of the hour. It's 21:00 here in Sweden, and you brought us to a beautiful place. I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Chris. I can feel the heat of this chair. I know what it feels like on the other side. Thank you for your questions. It was a pleasure.
Real pleasure. Thanks everybody for coming in.
Thank you everyone for being here with me and Chris. And if you can share this, like this on the Facebook group, that will help us too. Yeah, thank you for your presence.
Yeah, it was good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao, Mihael.
Ciao, Chris. Thank you.
Ciao a tutti.
Thank you.